I'd been awake for 36 hours when the first signal slipped through the static, but I wasn't chasing insomnia. I was hunting answers. 3 months ago, my sister Lena vanished without a trace, last seen boarding a train that never arrived. The police flagged her lost persons case before I even dialed their emergency line, chalking her disappearance up to wanderlust or teenage rebellion. I refused to accept their explanation. Driven by an urgency that felt like drowning, I raided every handshake she ever made, every late-night diary entry, every breadcrumb she left on social media. Nothing led me closer, until the night I uncovered her old shortwave radio, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her apartment. I knew it was an odd relic, but desperation makes relics feel like lifelines. I set the dial to a random frequency and turned the volume knob, half expecting only white noise and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Instead, I heard her voice. It was faint at first, strained by static, whispering my name and recounting a moment only we shared, our childhood ritual of jumping into the river at dusk. My blood ran cold. This couldn't be a hoax. Her tone, the timbre, the exact inflection she used whenever she was scared. My goal crystallized in that instant. Trace this broadcast, find Lena, and pull her back before it was too late. I scanned the dial methodically, marking frequencies, timestamps, and any shift in pitch. Each night, the messages grew more urgent. Snatches of conversation I never allowed anyone else to overhear, memories I'd locked away. The stakes became unbearably clear. If I failed, I would never see her again, and the radio's voice would fade into silence, leaving me with nothing but regret. I reached a point of no return when I discovered a pattern embedded in the static, a series of numbers that matched the platform numbers of defunct train stations across the country. No longer could I pretend this was a game. With trembling hands, I tuned the dial to the next coordinate, pressed record, and listened as the clock in my skull ticked toward a rendezvous that might break me or finally bring Lena home. I spent the next 3 nights hunched over the radio, scribbling down every static-cloaked fragment of Lena's voice and the string of numbers that surfaced beneath her pleas. I cross-referenced abandoned railway archives and realized those digits weren't random. They were platform identifiers for defunct stations scattered across the state. The first coordinate pointing to a rural stop 200 miles north. I packed my car with sleeping bags, flashlights, and the radio cradled in my arms, convinced that if I could reach that place before dawn, I might hear her voice live, unfiltered by distance or decay. The road was empty, the moon a pale witness as I drove through black fields that seemed to swallow the headlights whole. When I finally arrived, the station stood like a mausoleum, its shelter crumbling, rails buried beneath weeds. I climbed onto the platform and tuned the dial, and there she was again, her voice trembling, describing the scent of mold and rust, begging me to hurry. My heart pounded as I edged closer to the dark mouth of the tunnel, static crackling around us like a living thing. With every step, the radio hissed more urgently, Lena whispering that the train was coming, that the line was alive with something ancient. I shone my flashlight into the tunnel and saw the tracks gleam in the beam, disappearing into a void so immense I felt vertigo. It was too late to turn back. I could already hear footsteps echoing behind me, but they didn't belong to flesh and bone. My fingers tightened on the radio's dial as Lena's voice sharpened into a command. Find me. For the first time since her disappearance, I obeyed without hesitation. I felt the weight of the darkness press against my back as I stepped further into the tunnel, the beam of my flashlight cutting a narrow path through the blackness. With each footfall, the radio trembled in my hand, Lena's voice now entwined with a chorus of distant murmurs that weren't entirely her own. She spoke of footsteps echoing behind her too, and every time I turned, I met nothing but endless steel rails vanishing into a void. My pulse pounded as trembling whispers, some pleading, some accusing, wove through the static, each syllable a clue and a warning. Somewhere ahead, the walls of the tunnel curved inward, and I realized the air was growing colder, heavier, as though the earth itself held its breath. I crouched to examine the ground, uncovering footprints pressed into the damp gravel, my sister's shoes, and another set, too small to be mine. A shiver ran along my spine as I crouched and traced those prints with my fingertip. Someone else had followed Lena here, someone who might still be trapped in this hollow underworld. I straightened and turned the dial again, hoping for guidance, but the signal splintered into an indecipherable drone. Then Lena's voice cut through, clearer than before. "Find the lantern by the gate. It's the only way." A knot tightened in my gut. I remembered seeing mention of a rusted iron gate in the station archives, one that opened into an overgrown yard where travelers once waited for the midnight train. I pressed on, the path narrowing until I could barely squeeze between jagged walls, the footsteps behind me growing louder, closer. The static spiked, and suddenly I was flooded with a memory I'd buried. Lena handing me an old brass lantern for our childhood fort, her eyes wide with both fear and excitement. My hand closed around something cold on the tunnel floor, and I shone my light down to find that same lantern, its glass cracked but intact, as if waiting for me. When I lifted it, the radio fell silent, and for a heartbeat I feared I had lost her signal completely, until the lantern's flame flickered to life, casting pale shadows that danced along the walls and revealing a narrow archway I'd missed before. Beyond it lay the station's old yard, twisted by vines and moonlight. The footsteps stopped at the threshold, and I realized I stood at the cusp of the unknown, equipped with only Lena's voice and this fragile lantern. There was no turning back now. Failure to press forward meant abandoning her to this subterranean prison forever. I stepped through the arch and into the overgrowth, the radio crackling once more with Lena's voice urging me on, and I swallowed hard, determined to chase her signal through the heart of the station's silent labyrinth. The lantern's flame trembled as I stepped into the overgrown yard, the hollow hum of the radio pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Vines curled around rusted lampposts and crumbled benches, as though the station itself had been swallowed by the earth. I paused by a shattered timetable board, its glass splintered like a spider's web, and wiped away the grime to reveal a scrawled note in Lena's handwriting. "Follow the signal to the heart." My pulse spiked. Heart of the station, there had to be a central control room beneath the tracks, the place where signals once converged. I moved toward an iron hatch, half concealed by ivy, and with a heave it groaned open to reveal a narrow stairwell descending into blackness. The radio crackled, Lena's voice urgent. "Hurry!" My breath hitched as I switched off the flashlight and let the lantern's glow lead me downward. Each step felt as though I was wading deeper into the earth's memory, the walls slick with moisture that dripped onto my boots. Somewhere below, a rhythmic thrum began, a pulsing vibration that mirrored the static in my ears. I reached the bottom and found myself in a vaulted chamber strewn with antique relay switches and tangled wires, all coated in a sheen of rust. The room exhaled cold air scented with oil and decay. I lifted the radio to my ear. Lena's voice layered over itself, overlapping pleas and warnings. They're rewriting the frequency. Don't let them erase me. A tremor ran through the floor as the lantern's flame guttered. I strode toward the central console and brushed away a sheet of dust to reveal a faded photograph taped to the panel. Lena, smiling, next to an operator in a faded uniform. His face was obscured by shadow, but his posture was gentle, protective. Beneath the photo, Someone had scribbled in shaky ink, "He brought me here." My blood grew cold. As the radio's static spiked into a low roar, the wires overhead hummed to life, emitting a pale blue spark that danced across the console. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and flipped the first switch. The lantern flickered as the chamber brightened, revealing a tangle of tunnels leading off in multiple directions, each marked by a decaying sign. Platform 5, signal tower, control loop. Lena's voice screeched through the static. "You must cut the main line at the tower, or I'll vanish into the silence forever." The floors trembled, as if the station resisted my intrusion. I realized then that there was no turning back. If I failed to sever the current, Lina would be lost to this echoing labyrinth, her voice erased. I lifted the lantern high, heart hammering, and stepped toward the tunnel marked signal tower, the only path to the final switch that could free her or condemn us both. I pressed forward into the twisting corridor, the lantern's glow dancing across coils of wire that pulsed with a rhythmic hum, guiding me to the base of a spiraling stairwell. Each step echoed with static until I reached the signal tower's chamber, where a circular array of levers and dials encased a single, massive switch at its center. The air felt alive, vibrating with the weight of every lost transmission that had ever passed through these veins of iron and copper. I knew then that pulling this lever would sever the station's hold on Lena's voice and on my own fate. The radio trembled in my grasp as Lena's whisper surfaced through the static, clearer than ever. "You're here. Don't let them rewrite me." My fingers hovered over the switch, heart pounding like a trapped freight train, the sheer force of the station's memory pressing against my mind. I braced myself, closed my eyes, and pulled. A wave of heat and cold spiraled through the chamber as the wires arced and sang, the lantern's flame flaring into a ghostly blaze. For a moment, silence fractured by a chorus of echoes. Lena's laughter intertwined with the frantic murmurs of past travelers, and then an almost sacred stillness settled. I opened my eyes to see the radio screen flicker one last time, and Lena's face appeared in the static, smiling with a bittersweet relief before dissolving into pure, wavering light. The station's hum faded into a distant heartbeat, and I felt its grip loosen. When I stepped back through the iron hatch into the overgrown yard, dawn had broken, painting the crumbling platform in pale gold. The lantern's flame sputtered and died as I tucked it into my coat, and the radio lay silent against my chest. I half expected the world to snap back into the ordinary, but I carried with me the weight of what I'd learned, that places remember us long after we're gone, and voices can linger in the spaces between frequencies. As I turned toward the empty road, a soft click came from the radio, followed by the faintest whisper of Lena's voice calling "thank you." If you found yourself drawn into these silent signals, give this story a like and subscribe to WhisperTales so we can trace the next echo through the dark together.